today I wanted to talk about Michael Clay Thompson, and that is a curriculum that we have started a couple years ago. Once your child can read and is reading well, maybe you've completed some grammar activities. We did the Well-Trained Mind. We really enjoyed it. Anna did 1 through 4, and Abram did levels 1 through 3. It became a little cumbersome for him, wasn't as fun, and it's a lot of memory work. We like memory work, especially when kids are younger, so they memorize the 8 parts of speech, did all that sort of stuff, and then as they get bigger, they can use it. But it got to where grammar wasn't necessarily fun. And if you're watching this and you're like, grammar isn't fun, therefore, that makes sense, you haven't done Michael Clay Thompson. So I enjoy this curriculum just as much as the kids probably. The kids fell in love with the characters, which I'll show you in a minute. But I just like it. I feel like it's refreshing, it's fresh. Sometimes I will say one of the downfalls is I worry that it's not schooly enough, that it's, I don't know how to say what I'm saying, that it's too fun, and it's not always fun. I mean, we are doing a lot of work, and so now that we're in finishing the second level, and we're doing paragraphs, sometimes doesn't seem as fun for them, but I will say that it has inspired me at times as we're doing it with them. He makes language fun, and he says that it's an art, like an artist paints with their paintbrush, but a writer paints with their words. And so in the poetry section, I was like, man, I want to write a poem. I am not a writer. I do not write well. I do not do anything poetic, but he makes it to where you think, oh, I could do this. So some of the activities I'll do with the kids because it's fun. So I'm going to jump in and show you, so hopefully it's not too long. They have a grammar part, writing, language, practice, poetry, and then reading. Okay, so let's see where to start. I guess what I'll say is that every book has a teacher's book and a student book. This curriculum is sold to schools, private schools, maybe some public schools. So in a school environment, in a classroom environment, you would need the student book and the teacher book. For homeschooling, it saves you a ton of money. This I actually bought most of these used, so I bought both, and it was the first time I bought them. The second time around, I bought just teacher's manuals, unless it was something that I needed to copy, or maybe I had the answers and I didn't want them to see it. But because this curriculum is story-based, that's why it's so different. It teaches grammar and writing through a story, and that's why we needed to do a video to talk about Grammartown, or not Grammartown, we're in Grammartown now, Grammar Island. We had to do a video because I can't explain all of this without you seeing it. You have to see it. And so he does this in a story format, and sometimes I worry if we're reading it in a story, are they really learning the different parts? And that's where the practice comes in. So not only do they have a teacher's and a student edition, which you just need this, but because it's a story in the beginning, I can sit on the couch and have one kid beside me or 2 kids, on either side, and we will read through the story. Sometimes they read it, sometimes I read it. It just depends on which portion we're doing. And so not only do they have 2, but they have in the very back a teacher's section, which I think I have marked. And the teacher's section has extra lessons and stuff that you can do with your child in the very beginning. So this is the end of the book for the kid, and it says the end / not the end, just the beginning. So they know that's coming now with all the books. They're like, oh, is it gonna say the beginning? But each part has a teacher section, and this will have lessons, it'll have tests, quizzes, games, different things that you can do with your student, and those become more as the lessons get up, like the levels get up. Okay, so I'm going to read you some of it so that you can see what I'm talking about. So in the first book, in the grammar, you start with one book. You don't do all of them at the same time because they build upon each other. So in this first book, it does 4 parts. parts of speech, parts of sentence, phrases, clauses. He does a sentence analysis, which I won't discuss in depth, but basically the way that he does sentences, instead of doing the normal diagramming, he breaks them into 4 levels. And so your student will practice these, and you can buy this every year and use with your student, your child, or you can just copy them or type them out, write them. I mean, you could just buy this and then write it on the board or something and have them do it, but you do need the teacher's book if you're gonna do the extra practice. I don't know that it's necessary. We haven't used them a ton. Abram has done them some, but basically it's just here if you want it. Okay, so back to the reading. So it says, there is a place called Grammar Island, made of words and dreams. There are fish and birds and waves and wind and beaches where kids can play. On Grammar Island, you find wonderful things such as birds and language. On Grammar Island, you learn that thinking about language is fun. Language is talking and writing. It's how we make our ideas out of words. It is important to be good at language because we use language for almost everything, even to say, let's go for a swim. So the better you are at language, the better you are at many things. And so he does a really good job of making it make sense to your student, making it seem easy and relatable. Like, oh, well, I say things all the time. Let's go swimming. Well, that's language. Oh, I guess I do need this. Do you see? So when they think of it just as, oh, school, oh, writing, then yeah, it's not very fun. But when you think about, well, it's in everything that you do and it's simple, then I think it becomes a little more relatable. And he does a really good job of using diagrams throughout to explain and show them that it's easy. So like all sentences are 2 sides. Basically it's 2-sided and it's made of nouns and verbs, and all these other parts of speech just help. And he points out over and over, there's only 8 parts of speech. Only 8, and it's so easy. Anybody can do it. You can do it. And so I think that's what we really enjoyed, is that it was kind of, like I said, bogging down and becoming difficult. And so then to read this, it was kind of a fresh air. It was like, oh, okay, this is good. I can do this. And he uses, this is an example, he uses little stories like this all throughout, and they're just kind of funny. So I may not read all this one, but it says, once there was a speedy little pronoun named she. He calls them speedy pronouns because pronouns take places of nouns. So instead of saying Anna over and over and over, Anna Grace Laughlin, you might say she. Okay, she looked everywhere for a noun to replace, but every noun she found said no. She asked George if she could replace him. George said, no, I am not she. She asked Herman if she could replace him. No, said Herman, I am not she. Finally, she found Elizabeth, who was a very nice noun, and Elizabeth said, yes, she, you can replace me anytime you want. We can be friends, and that is how it was. So it's just funny, the kids remember, oh, pronoun. And I will say that these were good, that Josiah even would come and sit with us when we were reading sometimes. When we moved on to the next characters, he would ask about the characters. And I wanted to show you that it's color-coded, so all of the pronouns are colored. So as they work through the parts of the speech, they're seeing them highlighted. And for Anna, she had already passed all of this, but it was just a good, fun little review. I think she actually took this book and read it on her own and enjoyed it. Here's another example. This is interjection, and the 8th one, and this one's called The Conversation. The gang of 7 went to see interjection. So at this point, they've met every part of speech, and so he kind of builds with stories. And he doesn't just have stories, we just really, the stories were memorable and kind of stuck out to us. But he gives examples, and, you know, he's color-coded, again, all the parts of speech. But now, this is where you can identify the parts of the speech without having a worksheet. And that's the thing that I like about this, is it's not a worksheet. It's not. So that may be a downfall for some of you though. If you're busy and you work on the side and you're also homeschooling, you may need something that is more, you know, workbook based, where it's scripted, it tells you what to say exactly, and then you give them the work and they go and do it. And if that's what fits for you, that's fine. But for us, I don't work. This is my full-time job, and so I really enjoy just sitting down with them and reading. I do really enjoy scripted curriculums. Well-Trained Mind is scripted, and I love it because I don't have to think at all. I open my book, it says you say, and I read the teachers, they answer the questions. It's super easy. So that's why I really, sometimes when people say, oh, I could never homeschool, I'm like, if you can read, you can homeschool, because, you know, I was a teacher, but there's still tons that I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I will just read the lesson, and it makes you feel secure. Sometimes if you want to go off script, you can, but it gives you that security to go, okay, like they're going to get what they need. But with this, it's not scripted, but because you're reading it with them, and then that's what I'll show you, that the teacher's books are different, because they're really the teacher's book and the student books, most of the time, the only difference is it has these squares. And so that's just kind of gives them like an assignment or an idea of an activity. Like this one says, let the student write their own story. Pick a part of speech and then write a story that illustrates the nature of that part. So it may be that, it may be an open-ended question or something for you guys to discuss and think about. So that's really the only difference, and that's why you don't need this book. For language, you might need a second book, but you typically don't. So another story, the gang of 7 went to see Interjection to see if they could get him to talk. What's your name? Asked Noun concretely. Oh, well, said Interjection. And the 7 looked at one another. What are you doing? Asked Verb actively. Yes, wow, woo, said Interjection. And the 7 looked at one another. Want us to join? Asked Conjunction, who was very together. Geez, gosh, Jiminy, yikes, said Interjection. And the 7 scratched their word tops in disbelief. It was no use. Story goes on. But basically you get it. So you can talk with your student, oh, noun concretely. Why did he say noun concretely? Why did noun ask what your name is? So you can discuss the different parts of speech and why they do the things that they do. So again, we really enjoyed it. So the first one, it's a story. We finished it in a couple of weeks. Abram, I think, was in 3rd grade, so he was a little bit older. If you started this in 2nd grade, you may take longer. The second thing that I love about this curriculum is it's not, typically school's 180 days, 175. You don't have grammar, 180 lessons. Sentences, 180 lessons. Okay. That gets so old, and you have so much that you have to do. With this, I love that you complete it, you're done, you move on. If you want to practice sentences then while you're doing this, you can, or complete this, then complete that. The way we did it was we did grammar, sentences, and language, I think, at the same time, and then poetry at the end. And then this year we've done the reading because we started it halfway through. So we did this first semester this year, and now we're doing the 2nd level, and we've almost finished it. So this is something that you can do quicker, you can do slower, and I love that. So sentences. Oh, I'm gonna have to go quicker. This is taking so long. Okay, so Sentence Island. This is where the kids love it, okay? This is where they introduce characters. So there is a fish named Mud, and you are going to become Mud's best friend. You're going to go on an island. He's going to meet all sorts of funny characters that the kids love. They will reference, they'll quote them, they'll talk about them. Some of them make the same funny noises, or they, like one of them, can't even remember. The kids know all of it, but like I said, I love the curriculum. They love the characters. So there's one character named Clack, and everything he says basically ends in ack. So instead of calling mud mud, he calls him Mac. All right, Mac, clack. Okay, so different things like that. So the kids will talk in that, you know, if they'll be like, I'll be right back, Mac. All right, clack. That sort of silly thing. Okay, so chapter 1, Mud's Two Sides. Once upon a time, not so long ago, in a busy blue sea not far from Sentence Island, see how it ties them together, not far from Grammar Island was Sentence Island, a blue island filled with ideas. High in the wind, a gray bird could just discern the shape of the island, shimmering in the ocean. So throughout this whole book, you are going to find a ton of grammar information all about sentences. Again, really get great diagrams that make it really easy. You know, if it's an action, you could have a direct object. If it's a linking verb, you could have a subject complement. And then later they'll add the indirect object. But with this, they just make it super simple and it's repetitive over and over. Then in the second level, they do a review of all this and then add more. And it gets quite deep. So, first level. Okay, I told you it was long, I'm sorry. If you're still watching, this is language. Now, this is also a story about Rome. Because it's classical, they talk about Rome, and then for all of this, we do Latin. So in the next part, I'll show you, it has Latin, and they do Latin stems, which gets very deep, but again, we enjoy. So this entire book is about Rome. It has great pictures. It teaches you all about the arches, and then it uses the pictures in the form of the arch as an analogy to piggyback onto words. So it tells you how the arches were formed, why they're so magnificent, on and on and on. And after it gives you a brief history, which the kids enjoyed, they listened. I mean, again, we finished this book in weeks. It gets to the stems, and it tells you about Latin, it tells you about Spanish, and how Spanish and English words are similar. As the kids get older in the next level, what we've been doing is you can scan every now and then. It'll have a code that you can scan, and it will actually be an audio of, it'll have the English version of what we're reading and the Spanish version, and you can see it, but I cannot speak Spanish, I cannot pronounce it, so when you scan it, it will read it to you. So that's kind of fun for the kids to hear, and we enjoy that. So here's a couple excerpts from this to give you an example of how he does language. So for the word predict, it breaks it up into the stems, or what you might call a prefix. So it has, and all of this, it's teaching me, okay? I never had heard stem. I always heard prefix, suffix. So predict, and it tells you, this makes sense. Pre means before and dict means say. To predict is to say that something is going to happen before it does. So it talks all about how there are pictures within these words and how you can think of all of these stems as the building blocks that build the arches. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And all of the stuff that it teaches in level 1, it links to level 2. So the theme, if you haven't caught it for this one, is Rome, and then the rest is the ocean. So the second level is going to be a town. So you'll see that. Okay, I'm getting tired of reading. It also does fun stories. The kids loved to write their own stories about. It kind of uses each stem as a character. So it says spec. So this one was the stem spec, which means to look. And so instead of just taking cards, which we could have done, and I thought that would be so much easier, quicker, you get the card and it says spec, look, D, down. You just memorize them, you go on. Well, you may eventually forget them. With this, the kids will never forget because they still make jokes. When they're saying stuff, they'll use the stem word instead of the actual word. So here's an example. Spec looked here and Spec looked there. He looked, well, really everywhere. But X was out and Sub was under. And Re had done it again, no wonder. D was down and wouldn't play, so Spec just passed the day away looking, we suspect. So it gives all of your stems, I'm sure you caught them, X, sub, D, re, Spec, it gives them all kind of a persona, and each week as you add a stem, it'll have one of those at the end. It also has similes. Some of these, they were like difficult for me to think of what they meant, but here's one of the similes, a pre-simile. To make a simile with prepare your idea carefully. A preview is like a distant thunder. And then it says write your own simile for pre. And again, it has tons of pictures. We got the color edition for the next level, but it's rich in history. So if you're starting out, I mean, again, what I love about homeschool is it can be as flexible as you want. I mean, this could be your history and your language. This can be your reading, your writing, you're done. I mean, you add math in, you're done. Add some science and math, and you're done. We do a lot of school, but something that I like about this is that we can do 6 weeks of spelling, leave it alone. Next semester, 6 weeks of spelling, leave it alone. You know, do this book, be done with this, do these two, you know, so we don't get bored. We kind of break it up into segments, so I love that. Two things, I'm gonna wrap it up. Teacher's book and then the student trilogy. So he really wanted something that the kids could sit down and read on their own. He couldn't find it, so he made it. The kids love mud, and so he said everyone was asking him, write us more about mud. And that was the first question they asked, is Mud in level 2? He's not, but some of the characters that we met with Mud and here are in level 2. So that kind of kept them a little bit happy. But it's a trilogy about the fish Mud. And then the teacher's book, something that this doesn't do, it doesn't ask you to have your child write a summary of the chapter they read if they read it on their own. What it does is it gives you quotes. So if you don't read it with them, you could pull it open and say, all fish are ridiculous. Who said that? And then they would answer, Fidget. Now I quizzed them, I forgot that this was here. It has some open-ended questions and quotes. It has ways that you can dialogue about the story without saying, sit down and write me a book report, or sit down and fill out this other worksheet, you know. So this is very laborious for parents, but it can be enjoyable if you have the time and you want to put the time in. If you don't, that's fine. For now, we enjoy it. We might not always, but for now we do. So with this, I could just ask them those questions. And what I was going to say is that I forgot that they were here. So they'd already read book 1, maybe book 2, I don't know, somewhere around the way. And I was like, oh, let's go back. Do you remember who said this? Do you remember who said and they knew every single quote. And again, I think that's what I'm saying. I hope that this is teaching us as well as I think that it is. But even if it's not, just the fact that they love the characters and that it's not so like, oh, I love it. I love that they will make jokes about the characters, and so it's so fun. I think I'm done. This is poetry. I'm not gonna read it to you because this is so long, but I'm gonna show you what they've learned, okay? This is level 1, okay? They learn rhyme, alliteration, meter, stanza, simile, metaphor, and then you have some poems and again some lessons in the back that you can do. It's all a story. It talks about music and how really poetry is music and how you use words to make sounds. It's beautiful, okay? Super easy, super beautiful. My point with the table of contents is I barely knew all of that stuff. Like, I remember learning some of it, but this is level 1. We are about to do level, it's the end of the year, so we're about to do poem level 2, the end of the year, maybe in the summer. And I'm like, what else? Like, what's he gonna teach us? Is this gonna be super hard? Because this got pretty difficult. And most of the time, poetry isn't even something that you teach in public school, and it's definitely something I would put on the back burner before Michael Clay Thompson, but now we do it, we enjoy it. We have found Where the Sidewalk Ends and some of those books really enjoyable, and Josiah is even rhyming, like not always, but sometimes he'll rhyme words, and he thinks that it's funny, and I'm amazed. So anyways, it's a fun curriculum. If you want more in-depth, I can flip through, but that was about as in-depth as I can give it. I will show you, before I go, I'm not going to do it this time, but Grammar Town is your grammar, Paragraph Town is your paragraph, or your, sentence, practice, building poems, and then Caesar's English is the only one that I bought a student book to. This is my book. It's all in one, has all the lessons, everything that you need, answers, and then quizzes in the back, and they do take the quiz every week. And the student book, they broke into 2 parts. I don't have the other one out. It's in the cabinet over here. But this is the color version. It's so pretty. And again, this is basically reading or literature and history, because it goes all through Rome, Caesar, tons and tons of rich history. But it does so many quotes. Like it'll say Kenneth Graham's Wind in the Willow, Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And then it's got the Scarlet Letters, the House of Seven Gables. That's just one page out of here. It references all of those books. And again, that's a great place to get them interested and them to say, maybe I should go read that book. So anyways, I may do a level 2 summary when we are done, but that is as in-depth as I could do for level 1. So I hope that it answered some of your questions.